This is Andy Linehan. We are starting City Club. Welcome. Good afternoon. Welcome to our presentation on the state of the economy with State Economist Tom Potiowsky. Before we begin, I have our usual set of City Club announcements. Next Friday, January 25th, our weekly forum takes a very different twist. We'll be gathering at the Governor Hotel to hear three outspoken members of the Portland media scene take turns sounding off in a forum we're calling Rant. At the mic will be Colin Cowherd from KGW-TV and KFXX Radio, Steve Dean from the Oregonian, and Mark Zussman from the Willamette Week. Join us for what promises to be a really provocative program. And again, note, we're going to be at the Governor Hotel this time. We'll be in one of the ballrooms on the upper floor on the 11th Street side of the building. So we look forward to seeing you there. You can reserve online or by phone. Before then, next Tuesday, the 20th, we'll be holding an open house for City Club members, focusing on new members, but everyone is welcome. It's a wonderful chance for everyone, both new and existing members, to meet and chat, enjoy a little wine, and learn about opportunities to participate in City Club activities. If you can join us for wine and conversation, please do so, and please RSVP to the office before then. By Friday, I should say, by today. On January 26th, City Club bibliophiles will gather at the Zimmerman Community Center for the first meeting of the City Club's new book club. It's called Citizens Read. Author David Peterson Del Mar will lead a conversation about his book, Oregon's Promise. Later today, or during our meeting, Looking Glass Bookstore will be setting up sales in the back of the meeting room here, and they'll have that book, Oregon's Promise, as well as February's selection, which is Robert Putnam's book, Better Together. Watch your bulletin for details about both of these events. I wanted to remind you that all City Club forums are recorded on video and audio. You can purchase CDs of the audio recordings and videotapes of past club forums. Just contact the club to purchase those. The annual fund drive continues. We are approximately 70% of our way towards our $115,000 goal, but we need your help to be able to meet our annual fund drive goal, which is absolutely essential for us to be continuing to offer programs like today's program. You can now contribute online at www.pdxcityclub.org, as well as by using one of the envelopes that's at your table or by calling the club. More than 300 club members have donated so far, and we're counting on the rest of you all to participate as well. I'm pleased today to present the to City Club members the club's resolution recommending a yes vote on Ballot Measure 30. This was issued in our February 3, 2004, that's on the February 3, 2004 ballot. The ballot measure resolution was in the last week City Club bulletin. The bulletin, or the resolution, was prepared by the club's research board based on prior research, and it was adopted by the club's board of governors on December 22nd, 2003. Here to say a few words about the resolution is a member of the research board, Tim Hemstreet. Tim, here you are.
I just want to spend a few moments and talk a little bit about what Ballot Measure 30 is, as well as prior club research that helps us to establish the position that we used in order to take a resolution on the ballot measure rather than doing a full-blown ballot measure study. In August of 2003, the legislature passed House Bill 2152, which was a compromise tax increase arrived at after months of work. Citizens opposed to the tax increases that would result from House Bill 2152 successfully petitioned to refer the bill to the voters, and it will appear as Ballot Measure 30 on the February 3rd, 2004 special election ballot. Ballot Measure 30, a yes vote on Ballot Measure 30 would sustain the changes to tax law established by the legislature and result in revenue enhancements in order to balance the state budget. A no vote on Ballot Measure 30 would retain existing tax law, as well as resulting in cuts of over $500 million to public services, healthcare, senior services, and public safety. Prior City Club research regarding Ballot Measure 30 is really the following. Last year at this time, City Club in Portland took a public position supporting Ballot Measure 28, which was a 3-year temporary tax increase, a very similar proposal. The club supported Ballot Measure 28, although it failed at the polls. In May of 2003, so last year, City Club also supported Multnomah County's temporary tax increase, a 3-year personal income tax surcharge. That did pass, and the Multnomah County has stated that should additional revenue come to the county as a result of a surcharge such as Ballot Measure 30, then the county tax increase would be reduced. City Club also opposed 1994's Ballot Measure 5, not to be confused with the property tax limitation Measure 5 in 1990. 94's Ballot Measure 5 would have required a public vote on all increases to fees, charges, or taxes on a local or county level. The club opposed this ballot measure because it represented a fundamental shift away from a representative form of government in which all legislative work would be voted on by the citizens. Ballot Measure 30 being a referral of legislative work that took months to organize is just such a shift away from a representative form of government, and the club feels that this also is a similarly would nullify the legislature's work. That's not a path we want to go down. Measure 30 also meets the club's criteria for tax measures established in the 2002 Tax Reform in Oregon report. That report established criteria of certainty, clarity, fairness, efficiency, fairness, efficiency, certainty, clarity, and efficiency. Looking at Ballot Measure 30, tax increases do pass all those tests. And based on all of these past research, past City Club positions, the Board of Governors and the Research Board wrote up a resolution in support of Ballot Measure 30, and the club urges you to vote first and foremost, and do also put a yes vote for Ballot Measure 30. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tim. I wanted to introduce a new member. Is Mary Ellen Marmaduke here? There she is. If you wouldn't mind standing, welcome. Broadcast of City Club programs this quarter is made possible in part by corporate underwriting from Pacificor, C.H. Tom Hill, and Schwabe Williamson and Wyatt. We're very grateful for their support. On to our program. Our speaker today, Dr. Tom Potiowsky, has been in the news perhaps more than any other state economist in Oregon's history. Our local economy, our state and local financial situation, and our political leadership have all risen and fallen as a result of the economic picture reported by his office. Over the last 3 years, the news has been almost unremittingly grim, with practically each quarter bringing new bad news about the state's economy and the state government's projected revenues. So it's with a mixture of dread and cautious hope that we listen to the forecast for the Oregon economy for 2004. Since 1999, Dr. Potiowsky has been state economist for the state of Oregon. He's on leave from Portland State University, where he was professor and chair of the economics department. He works in the Office of Economic Analysis, which is in the Department of Administrative Services. That office is responsible for developing and disseminating quarterly state economic and demographic forecasts and estimating general fund revenue for the state of Oregon. Dr. Potiowsky received his PhD in economics from the University of Colorado in 1981 and had a BA degree in economics from Ohio University in 1975. Dr. Potiowsky serves on the board for the Oregon Council on Economic Education. Tom was a member of the Governor's Council of Economic Advisors for 3 years prior to his appointment with the state. Welcome, Dr. Potiowsky.
Thank you, Andy. First, I want to thank the City Club for inviting me once again. You have a very rich history of civic responsibility to Portland and the state of Oregon, and it is a privilege to address you today. If you attended the Oregon Business Plan at the Convention Center in early December, you were introduced to a new slogan for the state: Oregon, we love dreamers. Now, I kind of had the same reaction at first that you're having right now. But we were told there that the slogan had very stiff competition, and that the runner-up slogan was Oregon, shaped like Wyoming, only with beaches. So you can see that how possibly Oregon, we love dreamers won out. But really, if you see the ad campaign behind this slogan, It is very exciting, and I think it's going to bode very well for the state. And I believe that the phrase, Oregon, we love dreamers, is really going to catch on for us. Well, if Oregon does love dreamers, then Oregon certainly loves my office, for we have been dreaming of this recovery for the past 2 years. 2003 marks the third consecutive year of job losses in this state, and we certainly hope this string is now broken. The Oregon State Employment Department released the December employment numbers yesterday and delivered us more good news. The unemployment rate decreased to 7.2% and has fallen since June of last year. The quarterly job gain for the last quarter of 2003 is the strongest gain since the second quarter of 2000. Now, although John Mitchell on the front page of today's Oregonian believes that the recession is over, and he is one of the best to gauge the health of our economy, I will hold back judgment until I see the first quarter numbers of this year. Our forecast, by the way, says that the recession is over. My scientific gut says we still have possible bumps along the road that we have to watch out for. Now, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to tell you about our outlook for the economy, but I'm going to first start with a quick recap of this recession that we've just gone through. Just like two snowflakes, no two recessions are alike. This recession is notable for the drop in business capital investments and the large correction in the stock market. It is also an unusual time for our housing market. John Mitchell, once again from U.S. Bank, notes that this is the first recession he can recall where real estate agents are still smiling. You know, and this also seems like deja vu. Oregon felt this recession harder than any other state. Now, we fought very hard in this state to move the economy from huge swings associated with the natural resource-based industries, especially lumber and wood, to more diversified economic base. In the process, we accomplished half of this goal. High-tech manufacturing added high-paying jobs, broadened the scope of our manufacturing sector. But the manufacturing sector, in turn, grew in importance for our economy. This recession was especially harsh on that manufacturing sector, and it's centered on the high-tech area. We also have a new phrase to describe parts of our business cycle: jobless or job loss recovery. Now, this type of phrase is not that unusual. If we look back during Bush's seniors administration, we had the growth recession, and budgeting followed the flexible freeze. So having a jobless recovery doesn't seem that strange, I don't think. But in fact, the signs were out there that we were in a recovery and it was underway. The last missing ingredient was the labor market. One possible factor at work, and I emphasize possible, is that there was high productivity that carried through the 1990s, is preventing us from seeing this hiring take place. Now, let me step back a little bit. During the 1970s, we bemoaned the fact that productivity was so low in the United States. How can firms be competitive in the world? How can we use our resources more efficiently and thus produce greater growth in our economy? During this time in the 1970s, we worried about an ever-growing economy that seemed to have no productivity problems and had the perfect business model. Japan was out to buy up the entire United States and ask us to pack up and leave, probably to Australia, you know. Canada wouldn't take us, so I guess Australia might be our other alternative. Well, this feverish talk, as we know, died down and we got past this time. Productivity in the U.S. took great leaps forward, and now, on the opposite end, we're worried that productivity is too high and preventing job gains as the economy recovers. Now, we can think of this present time, and I liken it to, say, an evolving football league. Throw a little sports in here. The game starts out with very little equipment for the players. You need a lot of players on the team because of bruises, injuries, replacements for tired players, and an extensive coaching staff for all the players. Now, you add in new technology, you add in helmets, shin guards, padding, specially designed shoes. Your players now become much more productive on the field, they can score more points, they defend the end zone better, and they can play longer. Soon, you don't need as many players on the team. But if the season gets extended, teams play more games, then these bench-sitting players may get back in the game. But if the equipment effects are greater than the extended seasonal effects, more players are on the bench and possibly could be let go. So unless the games in a season can increase fast enough, The equipment technology will result in less players on a team. What other solution is there to this? Well, you could invent baseball. I was going to say you could invent basketball, but I didn't want to get booed. So technology really can spring forth a whole new industry of jobs. And we've definitely have seen that in our economy in the latter 80s and through all of the 1990s. So productivity truly is great in the long run, but it can cause some transitional problems in the short run. As the economy picks up steam and grows faster, job gains will come. And with that, we will see productivity drop from its lofty heights. But no one should complain that productivity is only 4% instead of 9% that we see today, when in the 1970s, we barely saw 2%. Along the way, as I said, new technologies should open up new business opportunities. Now, the other oddity about this recession relates to our state tax revenues. Although the employment declines of this recession were not as severe as the 1980-82 recession, the drop in state tax revenues have been greater, both in absolute amount and in proportion. The combination of the manufacturing-led downturn with the stock market correction worked double duty on our manufacturing-based economy and income tax structure. The last time we had actual state taxes decline during a biennium was 1939-41. And the last time we had a proportional drop that was larger was 1933-35. Now, the economy is picking up steam. The stars are falling into alignment. Semiconductor book-to-bill ratios have improved. Chip sales have reached double-digit again on the positive side. Exports are expanding. Business profits are making healthy gains. Initial claims for unemployment insurance have fallen. Large layoff notices have declined. And a sense of relief and promise appears to be spreading across all business sectors. Now, my office forecasts that this jobless or job loss recovery will turn finally into a job-gaining recovery, starting with the fourth quarter of last year. But the job gains will be very mild compared to the past economic recoveries. Job growth is projected at only 1% for 2004 and 2.2% for 2005. Now, presently, we're starting to work on our March forecast. Signs are out there that things have picked up a little bit better, so my guess is that 1% growth will probably be pushed up a little bit, maybe to 1.2%, maybe 1.3% when all is said and done with our forecast. But still, this is a relatively slow growth for coming out of a recession for our economy. Now, our rationale for this slow growth in 2004 is based on trying to find any large drivers to rapidly push up demand for our economy. Very little pent-up demand is out there right now. Surely, the consumers have not held back during this recession. And housing, the poster child in past recessions, has had a banner year the last 2 years. The area where some pent-up demand exists has been in the capital goods area. But keep in mind our productivity discussion that we just had. The firms with manufacture capital goods still have some excess capacity due to the rapid expansion at the end of the 1990s and better technological efficiencies. The high-tech sector has really moved from its baby growth years to a much more adult status. The unique product days have moved to products that have more of the characteristics of commodities, and commodity goods survive by finding the lowest cost options. So we should expect the offshore outsourcing to continue. Yes, they will need more workers, but many positions are permanently gone. Our forecast, which goes out to 2011, and for the computer electronic product sector, the level of employment in 2011 is still below the peak employment that happened in 2001. So we believe that, yes, we'll gain jobs in that sector, but there are a number of jobs that are permanently gone for good. Now, as we enter 2004 and through 2005, we see improvements across all sectors of the economy. The housing market, single residential in particular, may see some softening after experiencing historical highs the last 2 years. As the economy recovers, mortgage rates should be drifting upwards, dampening slightly the demand for new and existing homes. We don't envision any collapse, but the great times will simply slide into good times for the housing market. The wood product sector has enjoyed a very good second half of 2003, but still faces stiff competition throughout the world and an uncertain outcome to the Canadian tariff situation. We expect wood product sector to be relatively flat to a slight decline over the next 2 years for jobs. Transportation equipment jobs surged in 2003, but we believe this fast rebound from the drops in 2001, 2002 is pretty much over. Strengthening of the U.S., though, and international economies will benefit both truck, railroad car, barge manufacturing, and continued relative low interest rates should help out our RV producers in the state. The agricultural sector will be helped by declining U.S. dollars, which will help all our exporting sectors. And we also certainly hope that the Atkins diet is stronger than the power of a mad cow. Now, with a growing economy, we also expect more in-migration, but not nearly close at all to the level we saw in the 1990s. The population growth with a strengthened economy is going to boost up the service sector. So we expect retail and wholesale trade should see good improvements after seeing 3 years of decline. Now, as Mark Twain noted, forecasting is very difficult, especially when it deals with the future. So our outlook is subject to various risks, factors which could make the economy actually grow faster than our forecast, or factors that cause a slowdown or possible decline in activity in the near future. So these risks stem from the U.S. congressional policies, Federal Reserve actions, to geopolitical unknowns and other international conditions, and to energy issues. The one risk, though, that I want to spend some time with you on is the risk that comes from state and local government. First, I want to establish the relationship of government to our private sector. In reality, the two are intertwined. We have a mixed economy. Private firms have contracts from both the private and government sectors. Government employees purchase goods from services from private sector firms that have no direct dealings with government agencies. I like to describe this in a very simple way. Suppose we have a dry cleaner in Umatilla, which is close to a large state prison. Suppose then that this dry cleaner keeps 2 cash registers, one for its customers that work in the private sector and one for customers that work in the public sector. Does this dry cleaner worry about the public sector cash register, or figures that it simply is the private sector's money so that if it goes away, his business will not be affected? No. There is only one cash register. We have a private-public mixed economy. Now, state and local governments are latecomers to recessions. Businesses can see their economic condition, they need to cut costs, they make their hard decisions, and hopefully they can stay in business and ride out the recession. State government has 90 people, plus a governor, who are not necessarily of the same mind or agree on how the business should be run, and there is a 2-year budget period in which to make decisions. The recession did hit government, and we are now starting to see more of the very tough decisions that must be made, a culmination of all the special sessions and the longest regular session for our state legislators. And make no mistake, whatever the state government does, it will dampen the impact on the economy. If state government raises taxes, this has an adverse impact on the economy. If the state government cuts spending, this has an adverse impact on the economy. You cannot just look at one side of the equation. State government cannot deficit spend. That ability rests with our federal government. The risk to our forecast is the size of the impact from state and local government. We know it will dampen the economy. We are just not sure of the size of this impact. Now, part of my job that I have is to inform, like talks like this today, our outlook for the Oregon economy. I find myself before various business groups, other organizations, where the participants come to network and to hear my presentation. They certainly don't come there for the food. During Q&A, a question that has come up several times, and usually asked in a loud and demanding voice: should a government raise taxes during a recession? Well, this misses the other side of the equation. And someone should also ask, should a government cut spending during a recession? The answer to both questions is no, But unfortunately, when you answer no to one question, you have to do the wrong action with the other question. If you cut taxes, you cut spending. If you raise spending, you raise taxes. Did the Oregon economy do the right thing during the recession? Guess what? It did the right thing. Why do you think tax revenues fell by $1.2 billion during the last biennium? Because taxes fell. In essence, they were cut. This took no action, by the way, from the governor or from legislators. Taxes automatically decrease during recessions. This is the nature of income taxes. Collectively, Oregonians now pay less tax, even under present law with a temporary tax increase. Now, as a public employee, I cannot endorse or campaign for or against Measure 30. My position is to provide information, point out facts and errors, and to note when issues are debatable. Now, having said that, when I drive up I-5 from Salem, there are a number of posters that read, "Jobs, not more taxes, no 30." This is a good example of looking at only one side of the equation. I would like to add a counter slogan that makes as much sense. The temporary tax increase is current law and part of our forecast for the 2003-05 biennium. Since it is in the close of session forecast, it is also in the base used to calculate the personal kicker. As you recall, if revenues come in 2% above the forecast, all additional revenues above the forecast are refunded to taxpayers, known as the kicker. If Measure 30 does not pass, we will remove $780 million from the forecast, the vast majority related to the base used to calculate the personal kicker. The chances of having a personal kicker are greatly reduced. So here's the slogan: a vote for 30 is a vote for the kicker. This makes as much sense as jobs, not more taxes. By the way, while I'm on the topic of the kicker, we are presently not calling for a personal kicker, but we do project a corporate kicker. The last time there was a corporate kicker but not a personal kicker was during the 1991-93 biennium, and the corporate kicker was suspended by legislative action. Given our economic times, I surely hope that we can find a way to keep the good intentions of the kicker and get rid of the vehicle that attempts to deliver them. Now here's the tough part. We do not look at the present situation collectively. When unemployment hit 8.5% mid last year, this still indicated that 91.5% of the labor force was still employed. Because of factors such as discouraged worker effects, the unemployment rate is likely higher. But still, a vast majority of people are still working at the same incomes. The tax increase to them on an individual basis is paying more taxes. They very much subscribe to the George Bernard Shaw quote, "A government which robs Peter to pay Paul can always depend on the support of Paul." These people must weigh the risks of state and local government on the economy, just as my office is evaluating the likely impact in the future. To what extent does failure to invest in higher education and keeping K-12 school years whole allow us to be competitive in world markets and attract new businesses to the state? To what extent will continued reliance on income taxes and the temporary tax increases during hard economic times act as disincentives for businesses to expand and attract new businesses to the state? Very hard questions to answer. Do we seek to answer them individually or collectively? To close, I'd like to read a passage I found quite timely. And I would like to thank Jerry Hansen of Washington County for bringing this to my attention. With such a complex program, it is almost impossible to have an intelligent vote. Our rational alternative might be a constitutional amendment, which would empower the governor and the legislature to put the new tax into effect for a trial period. It could then be fairly evaluated at the next general election. This is probably the only way such complicated tax programs can be explained to the people. The school closures which plagued Cottage Grove Eagle Point, and North Bend in 1976 would not have happened if our tax program had been adopted. Oregon has always been in the forefront lines, strongly independent, not willing to roll over and die when other states have given in. The time has come to bring about substantial change to the state's tax structure. Unless we get such change, schools will continue to close and middle-income homeowners will be further impaired. Autobiography of Tom McCall, Maverick, published 1977 by Binford and Mort Publisher. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Potiowsky. As you all know, one benefit of being a club member is the opportunity to ask questions of our speaker. Our first questioner today, though, will be Chris Smith of our board. Chris is a lead internet technologist for the Xerox Office Group, and he currently serves on the Metro Transportation Policy Alternatives Committee and the Portland Streetcar Citizens Advisory Committee. He also chairs City Club's Advocacy Committee. Following Chris's question, other members of the club can join and ask questions as well. Please line up behind this microphone. We have only the one this afternoon. And of course, state that you're a City Club member and your name, and limit your question to 30 seconds or I'll raise the famous question sign. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Before your speech, we were talking a little bit about the tech sector that I'm employed in and the prospect that will probably not come back to its pre-recession employment levels anyway immediately. And I'd like to follow up on that a little bit and ask you about not so much what the level of our economy will be going forward, but maybe how the shape of the economy will differ a little bit. We see some interesting trends. It looks like our workforce has actually shrunk a little bit, whether that's out-migration or just folks sitting out the recession a little bit and not actively working is probably a little bit unclear. We also hear, at least anecdotally, that we're seeing in-migration of what Richard Florida would call the creative class, the highly educated young people, 24 to 35, who are coming here even without jobs. And that suggests to me that perhaps our workforce is changing a little bit. Clearly the sectors in our economy are not going to respond equally coming out of the recession. What industries, what sectors, what other issues are changing in Oregon's economy? And for those of us on the planning side, how do we plan to support that?
Well, I will say the aspect that we've seen about a somewhat shrinking labor force, I think, is directly related to the recession and having 3 consecutive years of job losses. You get people that are discouraged, and if they are discouraged, if they do not look for work, they are simply not counted as either unemployed or employed. They're not part of the labor force, and that shrinks it down. On the same hand, we've seen positive net in-migration measures. So in some aspect here, I think that we're having a fairly serious, probably discouraged worker effect. Keep in mind, though, that this unemployment rate is an indication of some social problems, definitely. But it tends to be kind of a rough measure. It is a household survey rather than an employer survey. For example, during the 1990s, we still had a higher unemployment rate than the U.S. average. But we also had a higher job growth than the U.S. average. This is the aspect of a lot of people moving in, not necessarily having jobs, and keeping that unemployment rate up, but we wouldn't necessarily say that was bad times in the state. Having said that, Chris alluded to this interesting aspect demographically of sort of the creative group, this younger group that's migrating into the state. And interestingly enough, we are one of the few metropolitan areas that is gaining this age population. Most metropolitan areas are losing that age group. And I think that bodes very well for us because, as Chris said, that is the creative group that is coming in. And so I think that is very hopeful for us. Now, in terms of what sort of industry mix might we have, what's going to look in the future, when I talked today was 2004, 2005, there's not really a lot of time to change the industry mix in just 2 years. We're going to basically have the same look that we have now. But as that starts to evolve, I think we are going to see some changes. High tech is still going to be the driver in the state, but not the same size driver as before. It's going to be a little bit more muted than we've seen. We have the outsourcing that is occurring, and that's going to continue to occur. Now, we have some industries on the horizon. We're betting some of our bucks on biotech to come into the city. In my own opinion, I think that is a very tough gamble. It's a very tough industry to break into, to have it as an actual center in this metropolitan area. Past areas, your Boston, your San Francisco, and so on, they've been in the biotech centers for well over 20, 25 years. For us to break into it, it takes a tremendous amount of money for this industry. So, but you roll the dice, you hope, gambles still can work out. So I wouldn't count it out completely. Then we also have nanotechnology. I think that has better promise. I think there's a closer leveraging to the high-tech center that we can use to promote that type of industry. So I think that is an area that has more hope for us. The other area, interestingly enough, is sustainability. Portland's really becoming known, and the state is becoming known, as the center for sustainable construction practices. Now, it's not necessarily a high employment area, but I think in terms of consulting, movements, you never know. Just as a bicycle manufacturer moves into Portland because it's known as a very bike-friendly place, you may have companies that specialize in making sustainable products also moving into the state.
Paul Millius, club member. You have not alleged, I'm looking for a word here. You have referred to the growth in unemployment, or rather the decrease in unemployment, and then sort of passingly referred to those who are discouraged and stopped looking. How much do you try to track what percentage of the workforce has essentially dropped out because they don't feel they're ever going to get a job, or every time they try they get turned down, and therefore sort of stop looking, and those who are underemployed, who might be working part-time for minimum wage with no benefits, and because that's all they can get, and this must also have some effect on the unemployment picture. I'd like to know if you do try to track that, and if so, what sort of percentage impacts does it have on the overall unemployment picture?
Yes. We cannot directly track those numbers at the state level. We do get some information, and can, at the national level, they do a little bit better on the statistics, and we can infer from what is going on that. We also have noticed when we're looking at our tax revenue forecasts and comparing it to employment growth, we have a little more of a disconnect these days than we had previously. And this is some aspect where I liken it to, say an Intel engineer. In the 1990s, they were getting wage increases, bonuses, they were using their stock options, their own stock portfolios were doing very well. All these things were kind of taxable. Now, all of a sudden, the bonuses are gone, the yearly wage increases are gone, stock options aren't used, their own portfolio's down, but they might still have a job. And so all those taxable items have gone away, and so our tax revenues have fallen relative to what we've seen in employment. And on top of that, many people that were making in the $50,000, $60,000 area, laid off, retraining, and they're coming back in $30,000, $40,000 area. That also has an impact of being underemployed. So we have anecdotal information about that, and we are tracking that. And that falls into our forecast, and this is why we have, although we have growth occurring in the economy, it's a rather slow growth, and we have more of a slower growth too for our tax revenues than what would have been true in past recovery periods.
Thank you. Megan Steele, City Club member. I'd like to hear a little bit more about your perspective on the potential economic impact of Measure 30. Has your office done alternative projection scenarios based upon whether the measure passes or fails. And even if you haven't gotten to that level of analysis, could you tell us, as an economist, what your thoughts are on this?
Yes. We have not specifically done alternative scenarios yet for the forecast, although, as I said in my talk today, we know that no matter which direction the state turns, no matter what happens with the outcome of this measure, it is a dampening effect on the economy. Now the question here, and it's a tough question, which dampening effect is stronger? Is it the tax increase that we're seeing right now, or would the drop in spending be worse? Now, if we go on a very, and I mean this in terms of a very superficial look from an economics perspective, we generally believe that any dollar drop of spending has a more dampening effect than an equal dollar drop in taxes. Rationale for this is that as you're increasing taxes, how do people meet that increase in taxes? Well, they won't necessarily cut their spending dollar for dollar. What they may do is go into some savings and use that to pay the taxes. That money gets turned around in the state, it gets used dollar for dollar. So there's a less of an impact from a tax increase compared to an equal dollar drop in spending. Now, that's, as I said, a very superficial level. Then you have to put in the qualifiers. Is the drop in spending, where is it going to fall? If we have the closures of schools, is this going to be disincentives for businesses to want to come here because can you attract good employees when they question the school system? On the other hand, with income taxes going up, is this going to be a disincentive effect for businesses, more so than just what we're looking at and what I just told you superficially? And would they then be discouraged about coming here because of these additional income taxes that they may have to pay, and that every time the economy gets in trouble, the state has to do this in order to balance its budget? Where in good times, then it sends the money out in terms of kickers. So those other qualifiers, and this is where the debate should lie, is, you know, what is the worst, what is the least of two evils? Not that if you drop taxes, that's going to make the economy grow like crazy. That is not the case. It is also not the case that if you increase spending, the economy will also grow like crazy. Neither of those are true, and it's the crazy part that I want to put on there, okay?
Bob Wheels, City Club member. A year ago, you made a prediction, an estimate for the year. I'm wondering how close were the actual results to what you predicted, and what kind of a grade would you give yourself?
Do I get to repeat the course? We do track and look because we learn from our errors, you know, and we see what areas we've been off at, because we break down, you know, I can tell you about the total employment, for example, forecast. And then what we do is we have all these different sectors, and so where were the part of the sectors that we were off at? And even at times, we have to, even though that error isn't all that useful, because we might be right on the nose, but it's because of the gods of offsetting errors in all the components, we were right on the nose. We might have been way off on high tech and way off on, say, the government sector, but it all netted out, so we were right on schedule. So we were off because we thought, if we look back at our December 2002 forecast, what I gave you was our December 2003 forecast. We were looking at positive growth by this time, close to about 2% growth. For the whole year, actually, we're looking at about, I would say, about a 1.5% growth for this year, 2003, where this actually came out to about a minus 0.5% growth. So we were off in that aspect. Revenues, there was almost no revenues yet to count, so as we got in 2003, but we were also off a good degree there too, although the drops started to mitigate a little bit as we got into 2003. They weren't as large as what we were reporting up to December 2002. So both of those actually caused us to reevaluate our modeling We have a completely different methodology for estimating taxes now. Crisis does help you move and really reassess what you do. And I will say now, our model's tracking extremely well definitely on the tax revenue side. And we'll have to see how we're doing on the employment side. You know, as I said, we're only expecting 1%, maybe 1.2% to 1.3% for this year. We could be too pessimistic. It could actually be a little bit stronger than that. I think that's possibly the error is on the upside this time rather than on the low side.
Tom Dunn, a City Club member. I guess I'll just make it brief. Is the declining dollar value really good for Oregon? Particularly good for us?
Well, let's take perspectives. Let's say that you're a travel agency and you take groups over to Europe and into Asia. You don't like it. It's not good for you. But that's, I think, a small group that gets hit. If we take a look at our manufacturing area, declining U.S. dollar is like being able to cut your prices on your goods without really needing to do anything, and you get the same money back, in essence. So it makes our goods much more competitive overseas, and it is a very, very helpful item. Now, you want to keep in mind, in China, the renminbi is tied to the U.S. dollar. So we don't sort of get that kind of movement happening. But in my estimation, what we probably will see is the Chinese government appreciating the renminbi just a little bit for political reasons. But it isn't really going to make much of a change. But definitely in terms of, you know, European goods, in terms of Japan, and even although we haven't depreciated as much against the Canadian dollar, and they're a huge trading partner with us, there still has been some help along that areas. So in my mind, yes, it's good for our economy.
Bill Kramer, City Club member. Tom earlier spoke about likely growth in the service sector. I'd like to ask you about one particular segment, the healthcare sector. On one hand, this is a growth industry in the state. There's continued increasing employment in hospitals and other delivery systems, also in the high-tech area and medical equipment and technology. On the other hand, higher healthcare costs puts pressure on state and local government for publicly funded healthcare, and it also increases premiums, which puts pressures on private businesses, since most healthcare is paid through employer benefits. What's your sense of the net effect of this? Is the growth in healthcare a good thing for the state, or a net not a good thing?
That's a very, very good question. And we've seen this sector, healthcare, has been one of the insulated sectors through the recession. Jobs have grown each year, 2001, 2002, 2003. And in that sense, that's been good for us. You know, those are jobs. They spend money in the economy, and that's useful. On the same time, the process of growth and what we've seen happen to business premiums, as you've mentioned, to the state, the medical costs, all those are more taxing on business budgets, households' budgets. You know, these are some of the reasons why we're asking for more taxes. Is to cover these sort of shortfalls. So I think we're given our population and the demographics, health care will continue to grow. What we will need, though, is, I think, a very serious look at a restructuring of health care. We've tried HMO. It seemed to work for a little bit. But, you know, we have various situations. I think, for example, and this is just, I don't know this for certain, but I would say the Woodland Hospital situation was more of a management situation. We're seeing hospitals being built by Newburgh and other places. So I think it was more a situation than that. And this is only an opinion. I don't want to get sued by the management of the hospital. So it's still going to be growing, but I think, yes, we have to take a serious look at our insurance policies, how that is paid. That whole thing is very serious, and yeah, we're going to need a restructuring of it, I believe.
Gus Mattersdorf, I'm a member of the club. It seems to me we tend to think of our community as being the state of Oregon, and yet right to the north of us is another state very similar to Oregon in its basic characteristics. And Portland, as a matter of fact, I think is probably as involved in the Washington economy as in the Oregon economy. I wonder if you have some ideas of how economic developments differ between the state of Washington and the state of Oregon, and how this could be ameliorated, evened out, smoothed out, made more consistent with each other.
Well, that's, I must admit I haven't given this a lot of thought. You may suppose a lot of the other things I said today I didn't give a lot of thought to. But, you know, the governor's office has made real concerted efforts to try to work with Governor Locke and his administration. I think the one good example of it is the Boeing decision. I think there was a working between the two states saying, you know, if we can get the new 777 to be built in this area, it's going to benefit both of us. And we can work together with it. And I think that's true. I think we'll probably see Boeing of Gresham also having some spillover effects from this aspect. So working in concerted effort, they're working in terms of businesses coming into the two states. They're trying to leverage their ability to do this. So I think that kind of work is going on. Interestingly enough, though, you try to look at the two states. They have very close similarities, but then also some very stark differences. You know, geographically and where the population is, very much similar. Where you have the mountains, the Cascades going up, and you have the western side having the majority of the population. The natural resource side is the east side of those Cascades. Very much the same. Same thing with population base and employment base. High tech, both states are very much involved in high tech, but very different high tech. You have a much stronger software aspect in Washington, where we are more the manufacturing side, the hard stuff in this state. And in transportation, they are the airplane, and we are the trucks and the RVs here. So there's some similarities through that, but I think over time, the efforts that are going on now from Ted's office and working with Governor Locke, trying to make some leverage out of our meager resources, try to bring in businesses that whether they come into Oregon or Washington, there will be spillover effects back and forth. Follow-up question.
A very quick one. What you did not cite in this review right now is the tax systems, which are as different as can be.
Yes, you're absolutely right, which I should have mentioned, because that is quite a stark difference, where we have the complete sales tax, business tax approach on the Washington side, and the almost exclusively income tax approach on our side. The income tax, by the way, is a very volatile tax. That's part of our problem. And consumption tends to be a lot more constant through time. So the income goes up and kind of goes around this consumption. So Washington has not had nearly the drop in tax revenues that we experience because of the reliance on a sales tax. But also, they are having problems because the tax base for sales taxes is being eroded through internet sales. And they're actually wondering maybe they should have a partial income tax and roll back part of their sales tax, just as we are thinking about a possible sales tax and rolling back part of our income tax. Now, I think if any policy that does happen, Gus, discussion of tax reform should be jointly done with State of Washington because of the border effects that could occur. If they aren't coordinated, and if we do have a sales tax, then we better be sure our sales tax is below Washington's rate.
I think we have time for one more question. Okay. Once one part of the economy that I didn't hear you mention, I'd be interested in your reflections, and that's tourism. You know, to what extent is it really an export part of our economy and brings in revenue? And also, if you have any comments about what can be done about strengthening and expanding that part of the economy.
Yeah, tourism is an important part of our economy. My office, and I've worked with the Oregon Economic Development Department, it's a very tough thing to measure. Unfortunately, our statistics that come from employment, even with the new North American Industrial Classification Codes, the NAICS codes, there isn't a code that says tourism. We've come a little bit closer now. We have a sector that's called leisure and hospitality, and we hope to be able to track that a little better. That comes a little closer. But if you think about it, tourism, how many stores dealing in the retail sector are related to tourism? And any one store is at 20% of the employees are tourism related. That's why they're there, and the other 80% is because of the regular population. So it's an extremely hard thing to get a good number on. But having said that, various surveys that the Economic Development Department has conducted does show that this is, it could be anywhere from the, depending on the measure, it could be anywhere from the fourth to the second largest industry in the state. Now, I think the state's doing a bigger effort now in order to promote that tourism sector with the new tax that's being put on accommodations and that tax dedicated to advertising for tourism. We've been a very low, in a sense, advertising state for our tourism. That, I think, is going to be very helpful for us. So that's going to be an improvement. Also, though, you want to keep in mind, there's only so much we can do. We have to still get people over any fear of flying. And that's not up to us to be able to overcome that if we're going to have people come here. I think over time that will get better. So I'm hopeful for the industry. I think it is going to be a growth industry for us. It's going to be tough for us to actually measure it. And what we will be looking at is that leisure and hospitality, that brand new measure that we have now.
Thank you, Dr. Potiowsky. We think, or we call economics the dismal science, but maybe the economic forecast for the state is not quite as dismal as it has been in past years. Thank you, and the City Club is adjourned.